Hey y'all, this is Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, and as you can see, I have Fred Clarke with me today.
Hi,
Of course,
everybody.
you probably know Fred Clarke as the owner of Sunset Valley Orchids, and Fred is well known for his Catasetums and maybe a little more recently with his Cattleya hybridizing and line breeding of some of these really cool species. But then, Fred is also growing a bunch of Australian dendrobiums and some Stanhopea hybrids and PAFs and all kinds of cool stuff. Fred, would you want to introduce yourself a little bit more as well?
Well, thanks for having me. So it's all true. I am the owner of Sunset Valley Orchids. Been doing this a long time. We're about 40 years now growing orchids. During my years growing orchids and also other plants, I'm a professional grower in the commercial plant industry as well. So I've done both things continuously all these years. So I've learned a lot about growing plants and then been able to apply a lot of my commercial horticultural experience to the growing of orchids. And those of you who have bought my plants probably are happy, I hope, with the quality of the plants you've received. So we're going to talk a little bit about fertilization today. So here we go.
Yeah, and so just a little bit of background for everyone who's watching this. Fred was in Texas during the first week of October, and of course, in Texas, all the societies kind of get together to bring folks in, so that each person coming to speak can hit these series of societies in quick succession, and it really works out well. So when Fred was in Austin, I had mentioned to him before his lecture that, hey, I'm having this problem of my Catasetums growing too big and throwing female flowers in. And so we've got a quick prop here to show that this plant had these, decent looking bulbs on back. Then last year I started using Jim's Purely Organic Fertilizer about half the time for half the year, and I got this monstrous bulb. And then this year I just went all in with Jim's Purely Organic, and I got these huge bulbs and of course these female flowers. And I said, Fred, I know that large plants throw female flowers, and female flowers is a good sign of culture, but boy, I'd love to get some male flowers. and you immediately came back and said, hold on, I don't know that it's necessarily your fertilizer as it is just this sort of continuous, almost slow release into the media. And so you had some tips, and to be honest, I've been growing for almost 30 years. And during that time, every year there's a brand new fertilizer that comes out and it's supposed to be this miracle. And, it ends up to be mostly hype, if not all hype. And so I had kind of thought, whoa, maybe I actually kind of found one. And then you came back and said, no, I don't think so. So do you want to kind of jump in and start talking about that?
Yeah. So it's interesting what you discovered. And so what I think you really found is that a continuous feeding of your plants resulted in better growth. And I think that, and so then there's lots of ways to achieve that. And you discovered a great way to do that. In our conversations, I had learned that you've been using these what I call throw and grow fertilizers, where you toss it on there and then you water, and it releases a little bit every time you water. And those fertilizers work okay, and they work best really if you're growing in a situation where you're in the rain, where you can't water with fertilizer, and that you let the rain dissolve it. And so the release of those materials is irregular, especially when you have hot, humid conditions. And in Austin, I think you got that all summer long. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it releases very quickly, the fertilizer, and then you're going for months maybe without applying any fertilizer at all. And so what I've discovered with orchids is that using what I call and what in the industry we call a continuous liquid feed. That means that you're using a little bit of fertilizer every single time you water. And that may have been what you discovered inadvertently by using this organic material. I forgot the name of it, but you throw that on top of there, and then it slowly releases over a very long period of time. So every time you water, a little bit is coming off, and it may, yeah, and so it's every time water through there, wash through there, a little bit of fertilizer comes out. And so I think you struck upon the benefits of a continuous liquid feed to your plants. And so there's lots of ways to achieve that I think that are more practical, and they're easier to do. And also it's very easy to adjust the rate of fertilization if you need to, where it's very difficult to do with kind of those organic fertilizers. And so remember, the orchids we grow, pretty much, not all of us, but Cattleyas and Phalaenopsis and Catasetums and Vanda orchids and all these things, they're mostly epiphytes. That is, they grow on trees or on the surface of rocks. And so there's not a lot of soil. And when we grow them at home, we grow in a soilless media, right? All orchid growers know you don't plant your orchids in dirt. And so you're growing in a soilless media, and soilless media has an absence of the soil microbes, the beneficial organisms that help dissolve organic fertilizers. So because of that, a lot of the organic material may actually be leaching through, and it may be getting trapped with your PET method in the water reservoir at the bottom, which might be providing some residual benefit. But so by using a continuous liquid feed, that is where you mix your fertilizer into water and dissolve it in the water, and then every time you water, you apply fertilizer, you can also accomplish the same thing. And the neat thing about it is, if you want to add more fertilizer, it's easy to do. You just mix a stronger solution when you water. And so you can adjust the fertility strength seasonally based on your plant's needs. And I think you'll find that you'll be able to grow Catasetums and be rewarded with female flowers year after year by using that method. But that method also allows you to back off on the fertility quite easily. You could go to half strength fertilizer, quarter strength fertilizer quite easily. And I was looking up before our meeting, and there's a device made by Dram Corporation. It's called the Siphon mixer. It's a Dram, their part number, it's Dram 22625. They cost about $20, and it's a device that screws onto the hose bib, and you connect your hose to it, and there's a supply tube that goes down into a bucket of stock solution. And when you turn on the hose bib, it just sucks up the solution, and you follow the rate for mixing. And then every time you water, that solution is coming out on your plants. And so that can be tailored to whatever strength that you want. And so if you had some plants that have been frustratingly female for years, maybe the next year you set those up and you fertilize those half as much or a quarter as much.
Yeah, and that sort of continuous fertilizer is what I was really hoping to get with these little baskets. But I didn't want to mix up sort of by hand and then put it into a watering, a hand watering device, and then go over my couple hundred plants in my collection over and over again every single day.
Yeah.
My goal was to just hit it with a hose and then walk away. And so I didn't know about this siphon device. So it seems like I'm going to have to shell out a whopping $20 to try and get this device. And then I can continue to do that same hit with water every single day, because I like to water my plants every day, and I have the media set up such that it works that way. And
well, so this way you'll be able to water with fertilizer every time. In nature, when the water falls on a tree and it runs down the tree trunks, through the leaves, down the trunk, it's picking up nutrients as it's doing this, and it carries a small amount of nutrients to the plant's root system. So by watering every day with a little bit of fertilizer and water under your conditions, with those well-drained containers you're growing in for Catasetums, I think you're gonna be very happy with the results.
And And for the specific fertilizer that you would recommend, would I, I had mentioned MSU as a good fertilizer. Since I harvest with rainwater, I harvest my rainwater, so that rainwater blend seemed like it would be a good fit.
That's what I would recommend. If you're using a pure water source, if you've got rainwater or deionized water, if you've got distilled water, if you have a well with pure water, then that 13, I think it's what, 13315 Cal Mag fertilizer from Michigan State is perfect. I've been using something very similar to that for a very long time, and I use it all the time. It's fantastic. It's the best for pure water that I've found. If you have hard water, like you're using tap water, like some of you folks in Texas, you've got pretty hard water, a lot like we do in California coming out of the Colorado River, I'd recommend a 20-20-20 fertilizer. And that's because there's 20% nitrogen, 20% phosphorus, and 20% potassium. But there's a lot more phosphorus than you need. But the phosphorus helps lower the pH of the water and neutralize some of the calcium and magnesium bicarbonates in the water to make the nutrients more available to your plant. And so the key is, oh, look at that, future orchid grower.
Future orchid grower.
Yeah. And so I think what you'll find is that the organic, you'll be able to have much more control over your fertility than with a material that you throw on the top of the pot and then just allow it, Mother Nature, to take its natural course. And so by using the liquid fertilizer, you'll be able to precisely adjust. And like on my Catasetums, I water with, it's 100 parts per million of nitrogen. That's the equivalent of a half a teaspoon of fertilizer in a gallon of water until I get the heat of summer. So when I get to late July and August, then I double it for about a month just to push that extra fertilizer into the plants. And then as soon as I get into September, then I go back to the lower rate. And I can do that because I can adjust my fertility, because it's very easy to do, because I'm using a liquid fertilizer and a stock tank that you can just adjust the concentration and really make those fine-tune adjustments. And actually, it's quite fun to do. You can do a test. It's easy to do a test where you could do a plant where you increase the fertility on and some you don't, and try to start off with 2 plants that are really even and see for yourself the benefit of being able to precisely adjust the fertility rate. And it's impressive sometimes, the growth you get.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is do just that in the spring when it's time to repot and divide into the Catasetums, and maybe I'll do it with a Calais as well. Chop it up and then see and do that sort of side by side, and maybe I'll have a control where I don't fertilize at all, and then I get tons of male flowers, of course.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing about I want people to grow the best Catasetums they can, and if they really do good at it, they get rewarded with female flowers. And so after you get to that point, then it's time to back off slightly, a little shadier maybe. Try dividing your plants often will help encourage male flowers. If you've got really big multi-growth plants, cut it down to a couple, 3 bulbs, 2 bulbs, and you'll often get rewarded with the males. Another thing too is it's not uncommon to have plants that will bloom female first, and then they'll follow with male flowers on the second blooming. You had alluded to earlier that big, strong plants are female, and there's obvious reasons for that. Those seed pods have to carry through the dormant winter rest that lasts 2 to 3 months without any rainfall at all on the plant. And the plant, of course, has to live to disperse its seeds so it can have offspring and repeat the process. And so big, large plants often are female. So by reducing this plant size and things was a good technique to get males. To get
the attractive male.
The attractive males. Well, that's subject to discussion maybe. Yeah. But I see this all the time. I am on about a 3-year cycle with my plants where I'll repot everything. And the first year I get tons of males. and which is great, but then I don't get any females, so I can't make any crosses. Then in the second year, I get a nice balance between male and females, and I make a lot of crosses. And then, of course, in the third year, I get nothing but females, or mostly females, very few males, and then I don't make any crosses again. So I've come to the conclusion that it's, instead of trying to repot the whole collection every third year, I want to do a third, a third, a third. So I always have a good mixture of male, female flowers for hybridizing.
Yeah, I think staggering that division time is probably a good idea for sure. Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I just want to say that lecture you gave was called the 80th percentile grower, and it's about how to sort of take what you're doing now in growing and become a better grower and get those bigger bulbs and better flowers. And that lecture was just absolutely amazing. Like I said, I've been growing for almost 30 years, and I learned a bunch of that, a bunch of new stuff in that lecture. And I've talked to some other folks who said the same thing. And so what I wanted to do was kind of take some of that, at least a little snippet of that, and bring it here so that folks could understand. Because I know fertilizing is a really hot topic. In fact, I've heard some societies, they ban the topic of fertilizing outright because people will get into fights. So, being able to get more information, I think, out to folks growing about fertilizing, I think is really important. So,
well, there's a few things about orchids live in a nutrient devoid environment, right? You can't really deny that. They live on the sides of trees. There's very little nutrients coming to the root system. So the root systems have evolved because they've been living on the sides of trees for millions of years to be really efficient at picking up moisture and nutrients. And when the rains start to fall and run down through a tree, the first water is the dirtiest water. We've all seen this phenomena. The first water running off a surface has all the dirt with it. And so the orchid root system, as we've seen, also absorbs water almost instantly upon contact with it. And so if the first water is the dirty water and the dirty water is the nutrient-rich water, and the orchid roots have evolved to absorb the first water, guess what? They're getting the most nutrient-laden water. And they need to, because they live in a low nutrient environment. And so you can duplicate this in your growing area just by adding a little fertilizer with your water every time you water. And the key's a little. They don't need a lot, a half a teaspoon of fertilizer in a gallon of water. At your society, I said, well, if you had a gallon of water and you put a half a teaspoon of sugar in it and stirred it up, would it be sweet? Of course not. A half a teaspoon, but that's all that's required. But the key thing that makes it work is that you do it every single time you water.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. That I think so many people will end up hurting their plants because they're adding too much fertilizer. They're even, I've always, even long before I switched to Jim's Purely Organic, or these sort of throw and grow, like you call it, when I was using the fertilizer that I mix in, I always tell people, follow the instructions, but in half. You take half of that and then you put it on your plants, because it always seemed like there's too much. And of course, listening to the instructions of the product, that they want you to buy more, right? So,
they want to sell you fertilizer.
Yeah. So less is more when it comes to fertilizing orchids. And I think that's true for Catasetums, who they're pretty heavy feeders, and Cattleyas and all the rest.
It's just due to the environment that they evolved in, and that small amount, right? A little bit of nutrients every time is what's happened to them over millions of years in nature. And so if you can duplicate that in your area, it works great. And it's even more fascinating when you think about this. So when you're in the summertime, when in nature, the plants are actively growing, the roots are growing, the shoots are growing, it's also raining more frequently, and it means that it's bringing nutrients more often, like maybe on a daily basis, to the root system. In the winter, when it's raining hardly at all and the plants aren't growing, the moisture isn't bringing nutrients to the roots because it's not raining. And so just like you will be in your collection in the summer when you're watering more. You're also fertilizing more because of the frequency of fertilizer application. In the winter, when you're watering less, you're automatically fertilizing less because the frequency of water application is less, just like the frequency of the fertilizer mixed in with the water. And so you adjust the amount of fertilizer your plant receives over a time period just by your watering, which makes it easy.
Yeah, and easy is important. I've mentioned that in a lot of my videos. I know there's some folks that will take 200 plant collection to the sink once or twice a week and individually. And I'm like, no. You making things easier keeps you in the hobby longer. And the moment it becomes a chore is when it's not as fun. And I think easy is really key to growing a lot of orchids and successfully, because then it's still fun.
It's important when you have over an acre of orchid plants growing on it too. You want to make it easy, because if it's hard, then it's complicated. And then you make mistakes when it's complicated. So keeping things easy and stripped down and simplified make growing much easier. And as a result, you can be better at what you do.
Absolutely. Well, Fred, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me about fertilizing. And I know, like I said, it's a super important topic with a lot of conflicting information online. So having someone like yourself come on and talk about it and absolutely just, blow my mind with something that I thought I had nailed down with this sort of new information or a new take and help clarify that, I think is great. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to chat, and I'll give you the rest of your Sunday back, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.